Hello, everyone, and today I am talking about Big Brother Canada 6. At this point in the show's history, they clearly wrapped up the first era where it had everyone from Big Brother 1 to Big Brother 5, and everyone within that alumni were heavily involved in Big Brother Canada 5, whether they were in the season or they were watching the season or they were pre-gaming. And with the show getting temporarily cancelled before being brought back like a few weeks later, it caused Big Brother Canada 6 to be a complete refresh, and you can definitely tell that they took advantage of it. At the same time, it kind of leads this middle period of BBCAN to be kind of awkward because it's not the most iconic compared to some of the earlier or some of the more recent seasons. With Big Brother Canada 6, I have never rewatched it, so the only time I watched it was live, and within the last 5 years, my opinions of it have somewhat changed. I knew there was a lot of issues with the editing, but I didn't know how bad it was until I rewatched it. And I mentioned in a few of the earlier seasons that there was a lot of inaccurate editing as well because they had their producer pets and they consistently shoved them down our throats, and it's definitely very present here, and it actively ruins the experience of me watching this season. And it even ruined it even more when I had to research what happened during that week because my memory of the feeds are obviously 5 years old and aren't as fresh. I also felt like the cast was a very mixed bag. Half of the cast were good players, and half the cast were not good players. Half of the cast were good house guests entertainment-wise, and half of the house guests were complete duds. With this in mind, I am all over the place with the season, and as I go through this review, I'm hoping that it will stabilize my opinion on it, whether it's in a positive or a negative direction. I also find it interesting that the season hasn't really had much impact in many of the later seasons as well, so it causes it to be in this weird place. Week 1 is a very standard week, and it's an even more boring week compared to some of the other week ones, so I'm not going to waste much time describing it. So, of course, we have to do the intros, and Arissa addresses the quick cancellation that happened before the season and thanking the fans for reviving it. We meet the cast. Erica mentions that she's about doing anything that is fun. Will mentions his labor job and having a son as a teenager. Kayla mentions that she is very competitive and athletic and to not underestimate her, which she definitely lives up to throughout the season. Hamza mentions that he is very obnoxious, confident, and competitive, which he definitely lived up to. Alejandra mentions her Latina heritage and how spicy she is. Kayla, Alejandra, and Will mention that they will get into a showmance if it helps them advance in the game, which clearly fit one of them. Rosina mentions that she is a storyteller and to not ask about her age. Andrew mentions being very authentic. Johnny mentions doing anything to win. Jesse mentions that he handles people with big businesses, a lot of money, and is down to being a showmance. Olivia mentions that she is high maintenance, confrontational, and can be a bit controlling, but isn't good at math. Johnny mentions that he hates alpha dudes, which is very foreshadowing, based on his trajectory in the season and how he kind of lets it blind him. And it also immediately pans to Jesse, mentioning that he's a bro and who will bro down, which is also very foreshadowing based on what we get from Jesse. Maddie mentions that people perceive her to be sweet, but she's actually very passionate and vengeful while being very manipulative, which we don't see at all in the season. Derek mentions being a small town boy who is now a city fashionista or whatever. Ryan mentions that he plans on being a Big Brother superfan, isn't nice, and has a very high IQ. Very interesting, I guess, based on what we know of Ryan. And Paris mentions being a very smart law student, but has a fun side as well, but she only cares about winning. Maddie mentions getting into her showmance. She doesn't get that, but she did fight her long-term boyfriend from being on the show, just not from this season. As we know, she's dated Bobby for 5 years, and it happened right after the season. Derek, of course, mentions that he's willing to get into a showmance, and we also see him and Jesse take off shirts, since it's clear that they are both cast to be showmance bait. Paris mentions being born in Iran and being bullied once she migrated to Canada, but she tells Canada to mark her words that she will win the season. Andrew ends up having to split the house into heaven and hell, which means the ones who are in hell will be have-nots, and the first person evicted will be in that group, while the others will be safe. And he ends up being this because he chose the cup that had the blue sign on it. The people he places in hell are Rosina, as he mentions how she talks too much, Johnny, Will, Kayla, Maddie, Paris, and Alejandra. These are the only 7 people who gets to compete in the HOH competition, which Johnny wins. Will and Paris try to make a deal with him, which he ends up rejecting, which I think is a dumb move on his part. We have the choice to vote 4 people in, as 2 of them are devils and 2 of them are angels. Veronica mentions that she's a kind and genuine person, despite her purple hair, but she's loud and fun, and Marin mentions that he'll be iconic, legendary, and humble. He fit the humble part, but the other 2, unfortunately, didn't work out for him. Johnny and Alejandra are annoyed by Andrew, mock his laugh, and him making apologies to everyone, and they surmise that they're in hell due to being the least threatening. Alejandra is nervous because she was the first to job and throws Paris under the bus, mentioning that Paris is easily manipulated and would have nominated Johnny if she won. Johnny pretends to panic to Kayla since he does not want to be seen as intimidating and wants people to feel bad for him, which he does to a few people. When he speaks to Rosina, he mentions that she was cheering for Paris to win, since she wanted a girl to win, and Rosina mentions that all the girls were doing that, and that they claim that he is a puppy who can't make his own choices. He ends up nominating Rosina and Alejandra for eviction. Alejandra is not shocked about her nomination, and Rosina is pissed off about her nomination. We see the start of Hamza's hugely inflated edit, where he gives Rosina advice about how to handle the block, and he wants her to stay since she's not a threat, and she can be a number. An alliance with Kayla, Paris, Derek, and Jesse is formed, called The Real Deal, where we have little hints of the future showmance that is Dela. Johnny ends up winning the veto, and of course doesn't use it. We see a conversation with Hamza and Derek, where the latter asks who they should evict, and Hamza mentions that it's better to keep Rosina, since she's the oldest person in the house, and she cooks. We get a bunch of Hamza confessionals, which to me shows that Derek wasn't receptive, since we never really hear his perspective on it. Rosina is evicted in a 13-0 vote, and we are told that on the day of eviction, Andrew went on a hard campaign to keep Rosina, and most of the house felt pressured, though we never saw this in the episodes for this week, but it would be a quick flashback of week 2. Rosina was a very unique house guest, and I wish she lasted longer than a week, and I wish we would have seen her on the feeds. Of course, as a player, she wasn't good, as she talked way too much. She was very vocal on who she was rooting for, and the person she was rooting for didn't end up winning, so that obviously put her in Johnny's crosshairs. I don't recall her being in any alliances, and she's just someone who wouldn't do well on most seasons. The second week was pretty boring, and it was definitely a disappointing way to open up the feeds for the season, as nothing noteworthy really happens this week from what I remember. So Marin and Veronica are voted into the house, and they're told that they have to create some story about entering the house, which no one in the house believes, and I don't even know why production made them do this. Olivia mentions in the diary room that she doesn't believe them. Kayla tells Derek that their bio, so the cast bios, goes out a week before the season starts, and Derek talks to Jesse, and the latter has Marin sleep beside him so the new players won't bond with Andrew, which is a pretty smart move. Andrew and Marin have a talk where they mention that they won't target one another and that most of the cast is filled with high schoolers, and I believe they are still friends to this day, and I know they've done a lot of stuff together outside of the house, so it's interesting how they just connected with one another like this, and they only have a week together. The HH competition is one that reveals how the house guests feel about one another, and it's clear that Andrew is on the outs as well as Hamza. Ryan ends up winning the HOH, and he is happy since the house hasn't talked to him at all last week, which definitely isn't a good sign for Ryan. Paris pretends that she is sad about being perceived as dumb by the house guests, but she cheers about this when she is by herself, since her strategy is working. Hamza, Ryan, and Andrew mention that the entire house is going to kiss his butt now, and he promises to not nominate Andrew or Hamza. Erica ends up having a talk with Andrew, who she claims is a friend, and she tells him that the entire house wants to target him and that she has to distance herself from him. It becomes a tense conversation, and he doesn't believe that the entire house wants him out. And she literally gives him all the names of the people who want him out, and she literally says all of their names. They leave the right room and into the living room where they continue arguing again as Andrew tries to guilt her because he put her in heaven last week. Alejandra and Jesse talk about where Ryan's head is at, and she mentions that he would target Andrew, since Ryan wants the good well with the house. Andrew does his apology tour the next morning, since he knows that he's a target. Derek and Kayla have a showman segment where they promise to take one another to the end, which is very ironic, and Marin and Veronica realize that they need to stick together. Ryan mentions that there's a red room/right room divide, and he mentions in his talk with Erica that he doesn't feel good about Olivia. Apparently, which isn't on the show, he was also pushing Derek and Kayla's names out there towards the entire house, where it starts building a target on them, and it makes it seem like he wants to target them in this week as well, or as a backup. But all this comes up to nothing. But it is the start of the edits kind of hiding Derek and Kayla. Apparently, Paris, Maddie, and Will are on the house, as they're in the white room, and Andrew and Hamza mention that Ryan spoke to everyone but them, so they see the writing is on the wall. Hamza tells Ryan to nominate him, since he wants to play in the veto and doesn't want to be backdoored. Ryan ends up nominating Andrew and Hamza for eviction. Hamza complains about playing with a bunch of sheep. Ryan mentions in the diary room that he has the plan to backdoor someone, which is Olivia. This is clearly a problem because he put up poor pawns, meaning that whoever his backdoor target is would stay against the pawns that everyone's out. Andrew tries to get sympathy from Ali, but she isn't giving it to him whatsoever, since he literally tried booting her 24 hours beforehand. Ryan tries to get the other players in the POV competition to throw the veto, which is a choice. This goes back to the house, and it's clear that they know he is trying to backdoor someone. Olivia is the main person, but according to the feeds, Derek and Kayla were also in the conversation. He then goes into the red room to state this, and they shut down his non-logical points, and he mentions that he watched 22 seasons and some sort of bragging rationale. Erica ends up winning the POV, and it's clear that Ryan's plan of backdooring Olivia is not going to happen, since all the people who could be replacements are her allies. We see a budding showman with Jesse, though I remember they would block all the feeds whenever the two of them would show up with Paris and Jesse at some point, and it was alleged, I don't even know if this is true or not, just some stupid rumor, that Paris' parents called the producers to tell them to stop showing them. It is clear that Jesse does not want a public showman, but there are some sparks. Ryan realizes that he was conned with his HOH and tries to get Erica to use the veto, but she has no interest in doing so and doesn't use it. Ryan realizes that his HOH has been a complete bust, and Andrew knows that he has very little chance of staying. Andrew and Hamza have a bad haircut scene, and they talk about their friendship, which did last a few years after the show. Will mentions that there is a divide between the rooms, where the red room is the quote-unquote cool room, and the white room is the quote-unquote outcast room. Ed realizes that Marin bonds with the white room more, and the red room realizes that they have the majority vote. Ryan wants Hamza to go over Andrew. At this point, I don't even know why he's pushing so hard for Andrew to stay, and Veronica decides to have one of the few house guest meetings that she will host in the season. She decides to go after Ryan and calls him out for trying to flip the vote, and I don't know why she felt the need to do this, and I don't know why she felt like this would better her game, since it only put her more in the spotlight. And Ryan mentions that he felt used by the house. There's a lot of push on the pairing/shermances, where Olivia asks Paris if there's anything going on between her and Jesse, which Paris lies about, but Olivia wants to pursue him. Apparently, this was really a nothing breaker, and they over-exaggerated this. Andrew is evicted in a 10-0 vote. It is so clear that Andrew felt on the outs with the cast, and he didn't mesh with the cast whatsoever. While it was cool that he had a few allies like Hamza and Ryan, The fact that his ally, Ryan, decided to nominate him as an HOH on week 2 is just a really, really, really bad sign, and no one had any incentive or interest to keep him. And whenever he would try to campaign or to talk to someone, it came off very condescending, and the conversation was just off. He pushed way too hard on the first week for someone who was guaranteed staying, and it didn't seem like he had much of a plan for his campaigning in the first week as well, so it just made him a very easy boot. After the relatively dull first 2 weeks, week 3 is definitely a good week and started the momentum of the increasing goodness of the season, or at least I thought at this point. Either way, this week started the season off in a positive direction. Jesse mentions that he is in an alliance with Kayla, Derek, and Paris while having a good relationship with everyone in the house. And Paris mentions that she has good relationships with both sides of the house, so she doesn't want to win this one. Olivia mentions that she doesn't trust the newbies, meaning Veronica and Marin, and decides to block them from winning the HOH. Throughout the season, or throughout this rewatch, I forgot how strategic Olivia really was. Hamza and Veronica end up beating Derek and Kayla. I wonder if this is when Erica started noticing Veronica as a competitor, but they decide that Hamza will take the HOH. And this is also the start of Derek and Kayla being good in competitions. Hamza mentions that he does not like showmances, floaters, and going with the house, so he wants to make a good move and stir the pot. Veronica feels good since she could influence his HOH. Ellie talks to herself about being glad that Hamza won over Veronica and mentions that she's a beast. This is where Veronica's target really starts to grow. Paris explains that she has the real deal alliance and the right room, but she's also closest to Will and Maddie, which is a very important alliance for the season. Apparently, the White Room is targeting Olivia since she is targeting Maddie, and Paris claims that she influenced this. I don't know how true this is, but I do remember Maddie and Olivia not liking one another. Johnny and Will would also be the main influences of the week, but it's that's really covered in the episode, and they also wanted Dayla targeted initially, which Hamza agreed with. Olivia is nervous since she and Hamza don't have a relationship and talks about it with Erica. Marin talks with Hamza and talks about whether Olivia or the showman Stella are the targets, where Hamza mentions that Olivia is a law student and will slide under the radar, but the showmans are the backup targets. Veronica thinks she should have 50% say in the nominations, which is just really stupid, and pushes for Ali to be nominated beside Olivia, since she plays both sides. It's interesting that a lot of people notice this about Ali, especially over Olivia. Hamza takes Derek to Wendy's, and the latter pitches for Hamza to join himself, Jesse, and Will in a 4-person alliance, and throws Ali and Olivia under the bus, since they have been sketching him out lately, despite being allies. Apparently, the background to this is, when Ryan was HOH, he told Ali and Olivia that he wanted Dayla as targets, and they agreed in the way just so he can leave them alone. This got back to Derek and Kayla, and this is where the distrust between them happened during this portion of the season. They make it seem like this conversation was where Hamza changed his mind, but it is not true. I remember watching this live when there was another conversation where Kayla and Derek talked to Hamza, and all of a sudden, within 10 minutes, Hamza becomes their hugest cheerleader, despite telling everyone that he wanted to target them for the last 2 weeks and the first few hours of his HOH. So essentially, Hamza got tricked into not nominated Derek and Kayla by Dayla. But of course, the edit doesn't really cover this. Will and Veronica are both in the hot tub until Olivia enters the HOH room and speaks to Hamza about being a straight shooter and knowing that they aren't best friends, but the house wants the newbies out, which Veronica hears since she's still in the bathtub, not the hot tub, the bathtub in the HOH room. Jesse and Paris are one of the last ones to talk to Hamza, which isn't a good sign, and one of them always goes into the washroom so the other can make their pitch. Paris mentions that anyone who's in the red room can go, though Jesse, Derek, and Kayla are open to working with them. Jesse mentions that it is time to go after anyone who isn't Olivia, Ali, or Ryan. I don't get his logic behind this. Ali ends up talking to Hamza and tries to get him to not target herself or Olivia. Hamza ends up nominating Olivia and Jesse for eviction. Apparently, Johnny and somewhat Will influence Hamza to target Jesse, but we get no explanation, at least up until this point, as to why Hamza wanted to target Jesse, and he mentions that Jesse is a popular kid who got his way. But one of the other reasons that wasn't shown on the episode is that Hamza had to get out of not targeting Dayla anymore, so he thought putting Jesse up would be a good excuse as to him still weakening them, though it just seemed like he just became a Dayla supporter in reality. Jesse explains that he was told by Derek a minute before the nomination ceremony that he is going up, so Hamza clearly told Derek beforehand. Jesse is shocked and wants an explanation from Hamza, who tells Jesse that he will take him off the block if he wins the veto. Hamza apparently swore on his partner to Jesse somewhere along the line, and Derek as well, and this will be important to remember for later. Jesse doesn't trust this, and Olivia speaks to Hamza, who tells her that he has a bigger plan. Paris tells Jesse that she is worried about Hamza telling Olivia that she isn't the target, and Hamza will probably pull her off and put Derek beside him. She mentions in the diary room that she is playing both sides, but doesn't want Jesse to go, and is worried for him, but Jesse plays it off. Hamza apparently swears on his partner to Derek when the latter speaks to him, though Hamza apparently already did this impromptu to Derek and Jesse, but it wasn't shown. Shocker. Jesse talks to Dayla, and Kayla mentions that either her or Derek will be backdoored, and they mention that Hamza has been telling people for a while that he wants a pretty boy out. Hamza ends up winning the veto, and Jesse starts freaking out since he doesn't trust Hamza's word on taking him down. Jesse and Derek talk about Hamza, and Derek is trying to tell Jesse to calm down and to kiss up to Hamza a bit more. Hamza was talking to Will, as apparently they call themselves Lena Neuf, in reference to Hamza's Lebanese heritage and Will being from Newfoundland, about what to do with the veto, and Olivia mentions that Jesse was freaking out and was already campaigning against her. Apparently, Jesse slammed the door too hard, and I don't even think it was hard. All of this was on the feed, and it apparently caused Hamza to change his mind from saving Jesse. Hamza hints to Derek that Jesse is going to stay on the block, and Derek doesn't take it well at all. And then he has a conversation with Marin, who pushes to backdoor Derek, but it doesn't seem like it's an actual possibility at this point. Hamza doesn't use the veto, and Jesse ends up cutting him off, mentions that there's a bigger plan and that personnel stuff was brought up, so Hamza should not be trusted. Hamza obviously doesn't like that his fiancée was brought up, though he was the one who started it on the feeds, and of course everyone is reacting to it in their own ways. Jesse campaigns to Maddie and tries to use her dislike for Olivia as a campaigning tool. Derek, of course, is campaigning for Jesse, which we see in his conversations with Paris, but Tara tells him to cool it, since they shouldn't throw their games away for Jesse in the case that he goes home, but Derek isn't getting it. Jesse mentions that his type are blonde women, and Olivia mentions that her type is him, and this is clearly just filler in my opinion. We get a BBCAN6 scene where everyone starts making out with one another, which is always fun. Will pushes for Jesse to go, and Paris doesn't like that, since she mentions that Hamza doesn't have a say in who goes home. Will mentions that it's what Hamza wants, though, as we know on the feed, it was mainly Johnny who was pushing for Jesse to go, as he had better relationships with Olivia. And Ali, Olivia, and Erica also never talked game to them, meaning the trio of Will, Paris, and Maddie. Olivia makes a pitch to Maddie, and Jesse tries to make amends with Hamza, mentioning that he would nominate Derek and Kayla, which even Hamza doesn't believe. Jesse gathers a bunch of people in a room minutes before the eviction and makes a passionate but cringe speech where he mentions that he's very woke, mentioning that Will, Hamza, Veronica, and Marin are a tight foursome. Apparently, half of the house wants Derek and Kayla gone, but he wants Hamza's head, which is what Jesse mentions in his speech. Jesse is evicted in a 9-2 vote. I honestly don't think Jesse did a whole lot wrong. His social game was pretty fine. It didn't seem like many people were targeting him entering the week, and it seemed like many people wanted Derek and Kayla nominated over him. But Johnny and Will heavily pushed for Jesse to be targeted, and Hamza's jealousy and being very wishy-washy and paranoid just caused a snowball effect of Jesse being sent home here. But at the same time, I don't think Jesse handled being on the block very well, and some of his reads were very questionable. He was relatively fine from the 3 weeks that he was on the season as a character and a game player point of view, though it is ironic that him and Hamza became very close friends for years afterwards, and I remember them doing Sequester together a year or two after this season. Now, about week 4, whatever positive momentum that week 3 was adding to the season essentially ended here, as we have a relatively safe and a relatively boring week here, and it is akin to the first 2 weeks. So Veronica mentions that she wanted to stir the pot with her vote, and everyone is freaking out about a vote, since everyone already knew that Sarah was voting for Jesse to stay, but there's an additional vote. I don't get why people are getting so mad about this, and I don't get why people freak out over one sympathy vote anyways in Big Brother votes in general. Anyways, Paris throws the HOH, Erica ends up winning HOH, and many people are worried about what Erica will do from both rooms. Regarding the votes, the Red Room almost all know that it's Veronica, and Erica hints that she wants to backdoor Veronica, but if she wants to take the shot, she has to be sure about it. But Ali and Olivia push her in this direction. Ryan claims that Kayla was the other vote because she and Derek are isolated, and the two of them end up arguing about it, since she blames it onto him, and since he's outright accusing other people about it. Again, I don't see why anyone cares so much, but this conflict between Ryan and Kayla that lasts throughout the entire season starts to be shown here, and it's very important. We then get Paris and Will arguing about the vote, since he thinks that she could be one of the few people who gave him another vote, and they mention that they and Maddie have worked with one another since day one. Will and Paris make up, but it then turns into them trashing Maddie and mentioning that they don't trust her much at all, since she butts into a bunch of conversations. And this is something they would do about Maddie all season, but it's barely mentioned or shown throughout the episode. And I think one of the reasons why is because they wanted Paris to look good. Erica has a conversation with Marin and mentions that he's on the shortlist because they never talk game, and he said this in an earlier conversation with Will as well. Erica has a conversation with Hamza and mentions that they have a good relationship with one another. Hamza wants her to nominate him so he can play in the veto, kind of like Hope is doing this season of BBCAN. And she's thinking about nominating Maddie, but he mentions that she is a waste of an HOH. Erica mentions Veronica, and Hamza says that she's a wild card, but she's the type of player that you can't miss your shot at. Veronica talks to Erica and wants to work with her, where Erica mentions that a lot of people think Veronica is the other vote. After talking to Ali about wanting to target Veronica, Maddie talks to Erica, who admits to Maddie that she's going to 100% nominate her. Maddie uses the quote-unquote strong woman card, and it's clear that Erica isn't here for it at all. Erica nominates Marin and Maddie for eviction. Erica mentions that Maddie is her target and that she's an easy out by this point. Maddie starts crying to Johnny since she mentions that using this for strategy, but honestly, I don't believe that was the case in reality, since we've seen her cry many times before and after this, and there's no strategy involved whatsoever, and she would later admit that she cries a lot. Olivia tells Maddie that she will veto her off if she wins, and we see a later conversation where Olivia and Ali mention that they want to win the veto so they can backdoor Hamza or Veronica this week. Erica mentions that she doesn't want to win the veto, but she can't throw it, so she ends up winning the competition anyways. Ryan, Marin, and Hamza talk about how Marin is going to stay in the house, and the other two realize that Erica might use the veto to backdoor Hamza or Veronica. Ali, Olivia, and Erica have a conversation about how they should save Maddie and backdooring Veronica, since she will nominate Ali and Olivia or Dayla, and they claim that she will steamroll the season. Johnny mentions that he's tired of being nice to everyone and how he wants to pick everyone off, so there's a little bit of content we're getting from him, since we've barely seen him in these early weeks, which is a huge problem with the season, especially with how much influence he has over the gameplay. Ali and Olivia does pretend to talk game with Veronica so they could somewhat set her up, and I don't get the purpose of this. Maddie, of course, uses Erica's competitiveness to try and get her to use the veto, and Marin tells Erica that he will go home if he's beside Maddie, and she tells him that she will probably not use it. Erica ends up using the veto on Maddie and nominates Veronica. Veronica is pissed off since Erica kind of trashed her character in the speech, and Allie and Olivia are more than thrilled that their move paid off since they wanted her out since the moment Veronica arrived in the house, since they didn't trust her. Erica feels really good about her move and is bonding more and more with Hamza. Veronica and Paris have a conversation where she is fired up and goes on her campaign tour. Paris mentions that she wants to keep Veronica since she wants her to go after Erica, and Veronica wants to start a war. Cassandra makes an appearance in the house, which is nice to see. Hamza tells Veronica to call a house meeting since he's bored and wants to stir the pot, which he's said 100 times in the season. But this ends up pumping her up, and she calls her second house meeting of the season and knows that she has nothing to lose, but she is annoyed that people are being fake and would rather people tell her that she is leaving. It's somewhat entertaining but somewhat awkward and cringeworthy to watch. Paris has a conversation with Maddie about sending home another number for them in order to keep a shoulder for Erica, which is the same thing that happened last week with Jesse and Olivia. Veronica ends up getting evicted in a 9-1 vote. Honestly, Veronica is an awful player and arguably one of the worst players in BBCAN history, potentially. She called pointless house meetings that only added a target on her. She made it clear how competitive she was, and she didn't interact with half of the house in a meaningful way. And she also caused that hickey votes for absolutely no reason, and wasn't even a good liar about it, as everyone came to the conclusion that it was her. She just didn't know how to lay low, slowly make social and strategic connections, and to be sleuth about her moves. So that's why she ended up lasting 3 weeks in the house, and she was a train wreck in all 3 of those weeks. At the same time, she was kind of entertaining to watch, but I think we had enough of her in general, and she would have gotten annoying had she lasted longer. So there was a pre-jury double eviction, which I love, and Arissa announces it, with Olivia winning the HOH. She meets with Allie, Erica, and Johnny to tell them that she wants to nominate Maddie and Marin, which Johnny pushes back on and goes on this emotional rant about, since they promised him in the past to not target her, and he starts losing his mind. She tells him that she might backdoor Hamza, and she tells Allie this as well. She tells Erica that she might backdoor Hamza, and Erica doesn't push back on it, which is definitely a mistake on Erica's part, since it shows Johnny is able to be more persuasive due to him pushing and Erica isn't, and it negatively impacted Erica's game. Olivia ends up nominating Marin and Ryan for eviction. Ryan ends up winning the veto and of course takes himself off the block, causing Olivia to nominate Hamza as the replacement nominee. Hamza is evicted in an 8-1 vote, and everyone is sad about this. Hamza is an awful player, and you can clearly tell he was a producer pet with how much they inflated his edit and made him more involved in things that he absolutely wasn't involved in. They tried to make him look like a mastermind during the Jesse week, though he was really all over the place and didn't know what to do and was very easily convinced. Apparently, Andrew was the one who pushed for Rosina harder than Hamza did, but they showed Hamza in the edit. And he got credit for things that he wasn't even a part of, and he really had no idea what was happening in the house, but they never painted it that way. In general, I feel like his inflated edit is one of the weaknesses of the season, especially in the first half of it, since it is so inaccurate, and it hides the people who are actually involved in the dynamics of the house and would become important later on in the season. As a personality, he was okay, though I did get annoyed with him at various points in time, and I do think that he went at the right time. I don't think he was bad socially, and I do think he was starting to improve, but he just had no idea what he was doing strategically, and whatever potential he had just whimpered away. And he had a lot more flaws than good qualities as a player. Week 5 in general is a complete bore, but it is setting up for what is to come. And with the end of the White Room, essentially, and most of the bad players of that room going, we are having a civil war between the superior Red Room as players. But the event of Week 5 in general just isn't interesting whatsoever. Ali, Olivia, and Erica are feeling some type of way since Olivia's gut told her to evict Maddie, but Johnny's temper tantrum was why it didn't end up happening, with Erica complaining about how much of a dumb move it was to remove Hamza since he was a shield for her, though Ali and Olivia clearly don't agree with this. Maddie and Olivia, with the latter being drunk, pretend to make up and attempt to work with one another in the future. It was fun seeing everyone but Marin get drunk, and despite wanting to throw the competition, Erica wins her second consecutive HOH. Erica and Maddie talk and they seem to want to work together, or Erica is not targeting Maddie, where she tells Maddie that she did not want to be HOH, as Maddie was second in the competition, which is a pattern for Maddie throughout the season, and is planning on nominating Marin and Ryan, with wanting Marin out, since she doesn't want large targets leaving the game anymore, and so she could hide behind them, which is a good strategy on paper. Somehow Ryan knows that she wants to eliminate a small threat to reduce her target, but Ryan outright tells her that it won't work because her target won't shrink and that she should not nominate him. Erica talks to Ali, where they are both worried about Paris and are tired of her flip-flopping, so she might be nominated. We then see Johnny sell Ali under the bus, since he mentions that she told Ryan that Johnny having a freak out over Maddie was the one reason why Maddie was not nominated. And she told Maddie that herself and Olivia were the reasons why she wasn't nominated and not Erica. He mentions that Ali makes a bunch of deals with others, and Johnny is doing this because he wants Erica to choose him over Ali in the latter weeks. And we see how this distrust of Ali from Johnny's end carries on throughout the rest of the season, and it doesn't do either of them any good. Erica mentions to Marin about how everyone sees him as a pawn, so she's thinking about nominating him. Paris then throws Ali under the bus and pretty much co-signs everything Johnny told Erica earlier. She nominates Marin and Ryan for eviction. Ali and Olivia predict that Ryan will eventually be a number for Erica, and Marin is trying to latch onto anyone he can, and that they can be someone that he latches onto, so they want Ryan gone. Paris also has the same sentiment, hence her trying to speak to Marin, and Johnny is thinking about backdooring a bigger threat, i.e. Dayla. Johnny ends up winning the POV, and Olivia wants Johnny to use the veto on Marin, just so they can ensure Ryan's eviction. Johnny mentions that Derek and Kayla don't really talk game to him, and feel like they have something with people that don't involve him, so he's thinking about using the veto. After talking with Erica about Dayla, as she mentions that Maddie would be an ideal replacement nominee for her, Johnny decides to not use the veto. Marin campaigns to Kayla about how Ryan told him that he is going home and wants him to freak out. Kayla gives Marin advice on how to stay and campaign against Ryan. Ali and Olivia also talk to Paris about wanting Ryan out, especially because Marin does so poorly in competitions, and Ali is about to lose her lid on Ryan. Ryan speaks to Erica about how close to Dayla that Marin is, which is ironic because Marin wanted them out like a week or two ago, and he knows that Erica wants them out. We see a bunch of random 2-second scenes of Marin dancing with the showman, and as most of the house talk about them, they enter the room dancing awkwardly. It is weird that we don't even see Kayla or Derek's perspective on this, since this vote is really about them, essentially. And we don't see why they want to keep Marin, and we don't even really see them actually bonding with Marin over the week whatsoever. Paris talks about her immigration story, where her father came up to Canada for a year, which was hard for them, and then the rest of her family came along, but it didn't take her until a teenager to fit in as a Canadian citizen. I really like hearing immigration stories in BBCAN, which isn't something that we see much on BBUSA, which is a shame. Erica has a conversation with Johnny about Kayla being freaked out that Ryan sees through her, and how Ryan wanted to work with herself and Johnny from the beginning, and that he will take a shot at the Power Dwarves, who she has been predicting the entire time, like Ali and Olivia and Derek and Kayla. Kayla notices the drift between herself and Erica, despite them being close allies the entire season up to this point, and she campaigns to get Ryan out, where she also pulls in Olivia and Ali in the conversation. Apparently, Ryan overheard Ali say, "I don't trust that biatch about Paris," and he confronts Ali about this. Ali claims that it is false, and we don't know if it's true or false, and we never saw this on the feeds at all. So no one knows, and it leads to a huge confrontation where Ali loses her mind on Ryan, where she says that he has nothing concrete, and he mentions that he knows she wants him out of the house. Marin is evicted in a 5-3 vote. So Marin is one of the nicest people to be on Big Brother Canada, and I do think he, like Veronica, had a disadvantage of coming in a week late. But as a player and a character, he was an utter bore, and he wasn't a good player. Though he was close to staying, but I don't know if that's due to any campaigning that he actually did to Dela and Ali. He never really found himself in a solid alliance, and when he did side with a group of people, they were the ones who were immediately picked off. And with Erica wanting to hide behind people, instead of him being a pawn that strikes along, they decided to clip him. He was seen as someone who was aligned with Derek and Kayla without actually working with them yet, though it was something that could have potentially built. In general, he's very forgettable at best. Week 6 is where I feel like the most memorable moments of the season actually starts to take place, and the season really goes uphill from here. Though I really hate how production manipulated the edit to make sure that the twist was used, but it was still a good week. So, Ali mentions that it's best for her and Olivia to work with Derek and Kayla since they are the only strong duos in the house and they've been working together the entire season. Paris throws the comp because she will be safe with everyone, and Derek gets immunity. Kayla makes a promise to Johnny, Will, and Olivia that they will be safe, and she ends up winning HOH, which Olivia didn't want to win anyways. Entering the HOH, Derek and Kayla were most likely the next targets. Ryan and Paris are not thrilled with the results, and apparently Ali and Olivia told Kayla that the entire house was freaking out when she won. Derek goes into the HOH room and pushes for Will to go and to nominate Johnny beside him. Paris talks to Derek since she notices that they have all drifted apart since their alliance broke up with Jesse's eviction, and she wants to be safe. Ryan tells Kayla that people told him last week that he needs to say that he needs to target Dela in order to stay, and he mentions that Maddie was the one who told him to do it, and that she sent him to speak to Johnny afterwards, and then he spoke to Will and Paris about it. Kayla mentions to Johnny that people told her that Johnny specifically wants her and Derek out, and he doesn't even deny it. Will goes up to speak to Kayla and tries to make sure that their deal is safe, but Kayla mentions that when she made the offer for all of them to give it to her, they didn't take it, and then Will's made a bunch of promises in the past that he has not kept. I'm wondering if this is referring to the Jesse vote. Will goes downstairs to freak out amongst the house, and Kayla ends up laughing. This is an example of why she eventually loses. Dela confronts Maddie about her coming for them and barely talking game to them, which she ends up denying. They pretty much tell her that she's going up on the block, which causes Maddie to cry and break down to Paris. Paris then goes up to the HOH room to convince them to not nominate Maddie and blames everything on Ryan. This is another example of the wonky editing of the season, where the reason why they wanted to nominate Maddie was because of Paris continuously throwing her under the bus. And she did that a lot around this point of the season. But, of course, they didn't show it to inflate her edit even more, and to not make her look bad. Kayla nominates Ryan and Will for eviction, and makes a rough speech for Ryan, which is not a good move, Kayla. Maddie and Paris are proud about the nominations, Paris is happy about the move she made, and Maddie is ready to cry on cue. I think it's BS on both of their parts. Ryan tells Kayla that he was not the person who turned everyone against her and Derek, and she mentions that they all claim that it came from him. Ryan confronts Will about throwing him under the bus, and he was told that all four of them threw him under the bus to Kayla. Kayla throws Ryan under the bus to all of them, and then Maddie confronts Ryan about throwing them under the bus. Maddie admits in the diary room that it was her and that he's telling the truth, so at least she has that awareness. And she cries to him as she yells at him, and she claims that it's fake, but I don't know if it's true or not. Johnny ends up winning the veto, and Dela confirms his belief that he would have been a replacement nominee in a conversation the showmans has with one another. Johnny also has his beliefs confirmed when he talks to Erica about it, and he's considering saving Will. Johnny talks to Kayla and mentions that people would send Will home instead of Ryan, and they could use Ali as a pawn. Kayla exaggerates this once she and Derek speak to Ali. In this conversation with Ali, she mentions that if Johnny uses the veto, she will nominate Erica. Due to the twist of the week where there are three options. The veto isn't used, the veto is used on Ryan, or, well, production edited these episodes to give Ryan a sympathy underdog edit, clearly incentivizing that the Canada would vote for the veto to be used on Ryan to screw over Kayla. Johnny doesn't end up using the veto. We get the continuation of the sad Ryan edit that started with the last episode, and he starts to campaign to Johnny that they need to get Kayla out or she will win, and it's better to keep him over Will. Apparently, Maddie threw Johnny under the bus to Dela, and that Johnny is getting too close in Will's ear. We see Paris and Maddie talk about Will and how he likes to be behind a power player and uses an example of how he wants to work with Dela, but will put them up simply because Johnny wants them out. They say he is too much of a flip-flopper and easily influenced. Ali, Olivia, Derek, and Kayla are all talking about how Erica has been distant towards them and how she is too close with Johnny, and it's clear that the two of them don't want to work with the four of them at all. Will also moves into the Red Room, where Johnny and Erica sleep, which pisses Maddie and Paris off. Canada voted to veto Ryan off the block. Like I mentioned earlier, it was clear that was the narrative that the edit was pushing, so this could happen. Kayla talks to the house about who she should nominate and mentions to Ali that she needs to get Erica out, and Ali is mentioning that it is too soon. She also tells Derek, the trio, and Olivia her plans. Kayla nominates Erica for eviction, and she is voted out in a 5-2 vote. Erica is rightfully pissed off, and after Kayla tells her how much she respects her, Erica yells that she doesn't give an F, with she and Johnny telling them both to F off. Johnny and Kayla then get into a screaming match after she leaves. I definitely enjoyed Erica throughout the season, and I found her to be a very bad double money sign player, and she was just very likable. At the same time, she won way too many competitions. She couldn't throw a competition to save her life, and it's even worse because she didn't handle the power well, and she got rid of two people who weren't coming after her and had no influence in the house. This would make sense if she had a big alliance behind her, and she was trying to keep the Red Room together at first, but around her second HOH, she really didn't care about them, and she let them grow distant towards her as she was too close to Johnny. I would say she's a mediocre player at this point. Maybe once I get to the player rankings, I might rank her a bit higher, but she was definitely twist screwed, and I do think things would have been a bit more interesting had she made it past this week, and if the twist never happened. And that says a lot, because I like the upcoming weeks in general. Week 7 was definitely an interesting week to watch in the season, but it would have been an A-tier week had it been accurately portrayed on the edit, but from what is shown, it's still very good. So the week starts with Will snapping at Ryan because the latter voted for him, but Ryan mentions that he also promised Erica that he wouldn't vote her out. Johnny lies about his vote, which causes him and Kayla to argue even more. Ali is happy that she didn't win, since her losing streak is working for her, where the winning streak of Erica didn't work for Erica, and Derek ends up winning HOH, which Johnny is really pissed off about. Will then picks another fight with Ryan about voting him out, though Ryan was told that he knew Erica was the plan all along. That Will knew about this, which is true. Will is an idiot, and it's annoying watching him in general. Johnny manages to admit to Will that he voted him out, and Will is fine with it, to his face, where he promises after Johnny left that he will get him. Johnny finally admits to Dela that he voted Will out, and Kayla pokes at him about being Veronica. Remember, Veronica lied about her vote during the Jessie week. Ryan decides to speak to Derek in an attempt to not get nominated, and that maybe they should kill the feud that they've had since early on in the season. Paris tries to get Derek to target Ali, who she hasn't trusted since the beginning, but Derek is also working with her, as he also mentions that he's been working with Paris since day 2. Ali and Olivia mention that they need to get one of the trio out this week, and that it makes sense for them to keep Ryan, who will never work with Dela. Ali talks to Ryan and tries to form something with him, since she knows that they can't work with Dela anymore. Ali talks to Derek and mentions that he's planning on nominating Ryan and Johnny, but she suggests for him to nominate Johnny and Will. Johnny talks to Derek in an attempt to save himself, where he admits that his game fell apart due to his own actions. But nothing comes of it. Derek nominates Johnny and Ryan for eviction. Derek mentions that he wants to send Johnny home, since he and Kayla are aligned with people from both sides. Ali tells Ryan that he needs to fight for the veto and to not tell people that she and Olivia are trying to help him. Johnny tries to butter up Olivia and Ali, since he needs allies, and knows that there's been some awkwardness between them since before the Erica vote, and Ali mentions that many people told her that he and Erica lost trust in her. Apparently, Dela just formed an alliance with Maddie and Paris called 86. Okay. Before the veto, Johnny does some evil monologue about he wants to sink his fangs into Dela's neck, and how he will be damned if he leaves the house without a fight. Derek ends up winning the veto, and it's clear he isn't going to use it, since he and Kayla are safe with their two alliances. Johnny speaks to Ali and Olivia that they need to turn against Derek and Kayla, since he knows that they are working with the trio, which is such a manifestation. And they won the last two HOHs, and could dominate even more. Ali has a conversation with Johnny where she mentions that he needs to bait Dela, and knows that while they are cool with him, the showmans can take a shot at them at any time. Johnny speaks to Dela, where they might be able to work with him, and he thinks that they would use the veto, but Dela are considering working with Johnny. Derek doesn't end up using the veto. Kayla and Derek are sure that Johnny will go home, but if Ryan ends up getting booted, it isn't much of a loss, and it also means that the entire house kept Johnny so he can take a shot at them, and everyone will go after them, which means that they need to continue winning. The trio are prepared to send Johnny home, since they think he will be a number for Ellie and Olivia, and Johnny is willing to play dirty so he can stay in the house. Ali thinks that Paris might have something closer with Ryan, so convincing the trio might be hard. What they show is that Olivia slowly pitches to Paris, where she mentions that Paris will vote if she feels like she's being told what to do. Actually, sorry. What I meant was she will exit if she feels like she's being told what to do. So they need to make it seem like it is Paris' idea. What they also show is Ali coming up with some sort of plan to get people to keep Johnny, and for her to get Johnny to make a pitch to the trio where they are pretending to think that they are with Ali and Olivia. This event is arguably the most controversial event in the season, because from the live feeds, it was solely Johnny who came up with the idea to have Olivia and Ali and, well, Paris and Maddie thinking that it was their ideas to keep him, and suggest it to the other side. Clearly, they just wanted a simple narrative, and I don't know how much production liked Johnny based off his edit so far, and they wanted Ali to narrate it, since she's better in the diary room than Johnny. Ryan is evicted in a 6-0 vote, since it gets to Derek and Kayla that Ryan is going home, so she of course votes with House. Ryan is definitely a bad player, since the one time he actually had power, he completely squandered it by putting up his two allies on the block to appease the house, and then changing his mind about it, but the entire house saw through him, and because of how he handled his power, he couldn't even recover from it, and he couldn't save his HOH, where he knew by the time it ended that it was a bust. He did have some slight relationships with people, but he was always at the bottom of the house, and he became a pawn a few times. But when it came to better players, he just couldn't keep up with the house anymore. Everyone kept on hyping how much of a superfan he was and that making him such a good player, which I always found to be so ridiculous. But there's an element of Ryan that you could easily laugh at, so I didn't mind him much, and I got some laughs out of him overall. I do think he is a more unique person in BBCAN history, just pertaining his archetype and the role he filled in the season. But it was definitely annoying that he got saved by the twist, since it delayed the huge fireworks a bit more. So week 8 is an all-time great BB week, not only just in Canada, but in BB history overall. So much drama, so much strategy, so much unpredictability. It just has all the ingredients of a great Big Brother week and round. So Paris mentions that she wants to stop throwing competitions and to not play both sides, but none of this matters since Johnny ends up winning HOH. It is ironic since Paris made a deal with Johnny on his first HOH that he rejected, but he's now making the same deal with her now. Right after putting Dela on slop, he celebrates with Ali and Olivia, and they're hoping that it puts them in a good position. Paris, Will, and Maddie are happy because Dela will be weak, and despite Ali and Olivia acting like they are masterminds, the trio controls who goes home this week via the vote. Dela are of course not happy, and realize that everyone threw them under the bus. Kayla and Derek talk to Johnny, and he mentions that despite the agreement to work together, he was told that it wasn't genuine from their end. Kayla mentions that everyone threw him under the bus this time last week, and that they wanted him to stay. Johnny mentions that he was told that they are the only ones who did not want him to stay, and Kayla wants everyone to go into the HOH room. Derek and Kayla throw the house under the bus, and it was noticeable that the trio were very silent, as Allie and Olivia spoke up to defend themselves. Kayla mentioned that Paris threw Johnny under the bus, and she gets really defensive. All the others but Paris and Kayla leave, and Kayla mentions that Paris mentioned something about Johnny and Mandy being the mastermind about Ryan going after Dayla. They show flashbacks that side with Paris, but they conveniently don't show flashbacks that side with Kayla. But from what was reported on the feeds and from what I remember of the feeds, they both were telling the truth. It's just another example of them glossing over things in Paris's favor and them giving Kayla a negative edit, even if they are both telling the truth. Allie and Olivia are mad because they knew that Johnny wanted them to be thrown under the bus. He calls them into the HOH room, and they don't like that they're being made to be people who are playing every side of the house. Maddie doesn't believe anything Kayla is saying about Paris throwing her under the bus, but that was something Paris and Will did all season. Paris mentions to Johnny that she has a crappy social game in reference to Kayla, and that Kayla throws the trio under the bus, since he will go home over them due to the duo. Johnny mentions that he wants Derek out, specifically in his conversation with Olivia. Of course, Johnny nominates Kayla and Derek for eviction. Johnny mentions that he thinks Derek is stronger than Kayla in every way, and Paris is bragging to herself. That was also a hint that Derek would beat Kayla if they made it to the end together. Anyways, Paris is bragging to herself, like she thinks that she is the reason that Kayla and Derek are on the block. Johnny and Will are talking about how they can't wait to vote Derek out, and Johnny has a conversation with Olivia about the target, since he trusts her more than Allie, which is something to remember in the future. Kayla is ready to throw Derek under the bus to save herself in need be, but none of this matters, since Derek ends up winning the veto. Johnny is fuming, and he doesn't know who from the trio or duo to put up, since whoever isn't touched has the power to choose who to evict this week. Kayla makes a pitch to Olivia and Alejandra to take out Flora, and they seem like they are considering it. They want Paris or Maddie to go, but because the wrong member of Dayla is safe, Allie and Olivia want to change it up. Maddie and Paris mention that they want Olivia up, and Maddie mentions that it's clear that he's closer to Olivia than Allie, and that he can't play both sides anymore. Johnny is in the diary room shading Maddie about her being a wannabe mastermind, which is another example of how the house guests perceived her in the house. Olivia speaks to Johnny, and he mentions that he made a promise with Paris to not nominate her, and that if he puts Maddie up, he feels sure that Allie and Olivia would vote her out, so he's thinking about nominating Olivia or Allie. Johnny speaks to Allie and reiterates the points that the four of them have worked together all game and could do it again, but she mentions that putting herself or Olivia up doesn't mean that Kayla will get evicted. Derek vetoes himself, and Johnny nominates Allie as the replacement nominee. Allie is pissed off, and Paris and Maddie are loving that she is nervous and in this position, since they control the vote. Allie campaigns to Maddie and mentions that her association with Derek and Kayla put her in this position. Maddie kind of rubs it in Allie's face, since for the better part of 50 days, Allie has thrown her under the bus, and Allie feels Maddie's abrasiveness. Olivia talks to herself about Allie being insecure because she did not win anything and will go to the end with her, since Allie will discredit her and will claim Olivia's moves as hers. This is such a random part to include, especially since it doesn't lead to anything and it comes out of nowhere. Kayla campaigns to Will that Allie and Olivia want to split the trio up and will put all three of them up in the triple. Will mentions to Paris and Maddie about Kayla's pitch, and they're considering it, since Kayla's back is against the wall, that she might keep them safe for a week if they save her. Johnny interrupts Derek's pitch to Paris in the half-knot room, and the two of them end up arguing because he mentions something about the Shermans are doing anything they can to save Kayla. Derek asks him to leave, and Johnny says, "No!" very bluntly. He hears the showman's pitching to the trio, and he blocks it again before getting Allie and Olivia into the room. Dayla ends up arguing with Allie, Johnny, and Olivia even more, and Allie starts losing her mind, which is just so hilarious. At the literal live vote, the trio still doesn't know who they're going to keep and who they're going to vote out, as Will wants to keep Allie, and Paris wants to keep Kayla, since Dayla made a final 3 deal with Paris in the morning, but Paris is still not very sure about who to keep and who to evict. She mentions that Dayla swore on their families and lives, where they feel like Allie wants to evict Maddie. While the eviction is actually happening, Kayla and Ali are telling them not to change their minds as they see the trio walk to one another to see how they are voting. Maddie tells them that she's voting Ali outright, and this causes Ali to get voted out in a 4-1 vote, which causes Ali to snap at the others, mainly the trio for breaking their words, and Will and Paris for talking about Maddie the entire game, and Will calling Paris a floater, and also mentions that John made the wrong move with the replacement nominee, and he tells her that she and Olivia would have kept Kayla, and she said no, she wouldn't have, though that is a lie. Right after Ali leaves, Olivia and Will end up arguing with one another. While I knew Alejandra was an entertaining figure in the season, I forgot how good at the game she was. She was really playing all sides against one another at various points throughout the season, though she was obviously closer with Johnny, Erica, Derek, and Kayla. She was always very self-interested, and I forgot that she and Olivia pushed the Veronica boot to happen. While she definitely got way too much credit for the Save Johnny move, she definitely had a lot of agency throughout the game, and everyone knew that she was playing hard. At the same time, a lot of people knew that she wasn't trustworthy, and because of her bigger personality, it caused her to be a shield for Olivia, and her relationship with Johnny ended up being her downfall. I also enjoyed the Cold War that she and Paris had with one another throughout the entire season. The remaining 7 are told that it is a triple eviction, which they predicted weeks ago since there's only 2 weeks left of the season and there are 8 people left. And Derek ends up winning HOH. He nominates Johnny, Olivia, and Maddie for eviction. Kayla wins the veto, and of course she keeps the nominations the same. Johnny and Olivia are evicted in a 3-0 vote to save Maddie. Like Ali, I always saw Olivia as a comedic figure, and while I knew that she was playing the game, I forgot how good she was at playing the game, especially compared to Alejandra, as I thought it was mainly Ali who was running things. Olivia definitely had the better social game, at least later on in the season, though she was very rough in the beginning of the season, but while the other side wanted to target her, she had a lot of relationships, which ended up keeping her safe. Because she was so blunt and honest about everything, it made her look better than Ali. So people trusted her more, like Johnny and Erica, and people gave her information a lot more. I liked how she handled her HOH, where she made a self-interested move in getting rid of Hamza, someone who she had no relationship with, and someone who was targeting her, but she didn't alienate her allies. Overall, a very likable presence in the house and season. So, watching the season and catching up on everything, I definitely found Johnny to be very laser focused on Kayla and Derek, and I do think it ended up being his downfall, as he is going after them way before any of his allies were. At the same time, he's easily the best player of the season. Socially, he was magnificent. He had relationships with everyone in both rooms, and he used both rooms for game purposes. He was very good in competitions, and was one of the few people who actually saved themselves when they were certain to go home. But of course, he didn't get much credit for that, and he was also the main one who pushed for Jesse to get voted out in week 3. At the same time, I do find him a bit too emotional, like how he reacted when Maddie was in consideration of being nominated, and how he handled Derek and Kayla at several points throughout the season as well. So that is a weakness of him. At the same time, I did enjoy him when we did see him. We just didn't see a lot of him throughout the season. Of course, week 9 was going to be dim in comparison to the epic week 8, but I feel like there's a lot of good and interesting things that happened in this week, which is rare because the end game, usually the final 5, is usually pretty boring. So Kayla ends up winning the HOH, and the trio are very sad about the results, mentioning that they made the wrong move. Maddie speaks to them and comes to the realization that they can all stay if they get Derek out. The person out of the trio who isn't nominated needs to win the veto, meaning the nominees throw it to that person, they take off one of them, and they send Derek home with their votes. Maddie campaigns for herself to Kayla since they realize that Maddie is at the bottom of the alliance, and Maddie mentions that she was the one who wanted to vote to evict Ali, while the other 2 were wavering, which is true. Paris can sense that Maddie is off after speaking with Kayla, so Paris talks to the couple, and they ask her about why they were wavering. Paris asks Maddie if Maddie mentioned that Paris was the one that was wavering, and Maddie said that She said both of them were wavering, meaning Paris and Will, and she knows that herself and Will always question her about everything and will choose one another over her. Will and Paris act like entitled a-holes, which they've been the entire season, but most of it didn't air, but the show never showed them treating Maddie like this, at all, up until this point. This leads to them arguing and gaslighting Maddie, mentioning that they'll never vote for her, and how Maddie mentions that Johnny told her that in the first double, Johnny was the only one who told Olivia to not nominate her, which is also true. And then they call her a manipulative person and how she's the most manipulative and horrible person that they've ever met, and Paris acted like she protected Maddie the entire game, which she isn't really that true. Will throws Maddie under the bus to Dayla and tells about Maddie's plan to backdoor Derek. Kayla nominates Maddie and Paris for eviction. Kayla tells Paris that Maddie just can't win the veto and that Paris will be fine otherwise, since Maddie is Kayla's target. Maddie ends up apologizing to Paris and Will and feeling like she sold her soul earlier in the day. Will speaks to Dayla about not using the veto, and after Derek leaves the room, Kayla makes a final two with Will, since she knows she cannot beat Derek at the end. Paris is astounded that Will made a promise to Kayla and swore on his son that he would not use the veto, but she tells him that he has to use it to send Derek home, or they will win the game. Derek manages to convince Will to drop out of the veto competition after Paris and Maddie are already eliminated, and Will agrees with it. Kayla ends up winning the veto and is glad that she now ties Derek's comp record. Will is now mad at the blunder he made, but is blaming Derek for it instead of himself, and Kayla reassures him on their final two. Maddie and Paris attempt to get Kayla to use the veto to send Derek home, but even they know it's an effing reach. Kayla mentions to Maddie that she wants to cut Derek, and this played a part in Kayla's final fate in the season. Of course, Kayla doesn't use the veto. Kayla mentions that Maddie being so close to winning in mental competitions is why she needs to go. Maddie knows that her time is coming to an end, but she's always been an option for nomination every week and isn't going to give up. Maddie mentions to Derek that Paris does well in endurance competitions, which we saw in the two competitions Johnny won that were endurance, and that Derek never competed in an endurance competition with her, which is heavy foreshadowing. Paris gets annoyed with Will and goes on some rant about him. Maddie talks about the people in her life telling her that she wasn't smart enough, hot enough, wasn't interesting enough, and just wasn't enough for anything in life, and especially to make it onto the show, since she's too normal and doesn't have the biggest personality. Paris ends up campaigning to Kayla and is worried about Maddie's words, since it would be a mistake for Derek to keep Maddie. Maddie mentions the endurance argument about Paris to Will, and that she would get the jury votes over him. Paris mentions to Derek that he would be an idiot if he kept Maddie, since she knows about statistics and all of that. We do see her studying with pasta earlier in the episode. None of this matters as Maddie is evicted in a 2-0 vote. Maddie is a very nice woman, and I really like how much of a fan she was of the game, and I remember seeing the footage of her crying when the show got revived. At the same time, she just isn't a good player. For some reason, her social game was pretty bad. A lot of people didn't like or trust her, and she was very emotional throughout the entire season. While she always wanted to make big moves, she rarely ever got her way outside of the alley vote. I remember in the beginning of the season, she mentioned that she wanted to be this cutthroat, cold-hearted, manipulative player, but it just wasn't in her, and she's just a nice, normal person. I really didn't like how Will and Paris treated her throughout the entire season, but at the same time, she didn't really have a backbone, and she never took agency for herself. She would also go to the jury and heavily campaign for Paris, where Kayla ended up telling Maddie her entire game, but apparently Maddie twisted everything and made it look like Paris did a lot of those moves in the jury house, so there's that. And now it is time to talk about week 10, and it's a fine enough final week of a season. Paris ends up winning the final four HOH, despite Derek feeling confident that the comp was his to win. From this point onwards, you definitely see Derek's lack of BB fandom starting to bite him in the butt. Kayla is upset because her ideal final three was herself, Derek, and Will, which now can't happen. Dayla know that they have half a chance of winning the veto, but is feeling more confident that Derek would be the one that is evicted, since people are more scared of him than her. Paris is really happy since she sees the endgame now and it's everything she's envisioned since she was 11. And she also talks more about her parents migrating to Canada when many people don't get the opportunity, and she kind of feels guilty for being able to become a Canadian citizen and for being in the game. Derek and Kayla talk about their relationship and how they wouldn't have made it far without the other one. Will is nervous about not making it to the final three, and Paris feels more assured than ever that it'll happen after her HOH win, which gave her more confidence. And then there's an awkward conversation between Kayla and Derek about them taking one another to the end, and Derek mentions that he'll be better and wouldn't vote for her if she cuts him at the end. Obviously, Paris nominates Derek and Kayla for eviction. Kayla ends up winning the veto, and of course there's a lot of emphasis on her needing to cut Derek from Will and Paris, and how she will look stupid if she doesn't cut him. Of course, none of it is for naught, and Kayla, of course, evicts Will. Will was very obnoxious and irritating throughout the entire season, and they didn't even show half of his foul antics, in my opinion. He was actually doing very well socially for the first few weeks of the season, but during the 1 week where he decided to make action, which was in week 3, he made the wrong move for him, since evicting Jesse, someone who wasn't coming after him, and someone who would have protected him, would have gave him more agency throughout the rest of the season. People saw more and more of his antics where he just lashed out at people and had very weak emotional and mental intelligence. He was then kind of carried by Maddie and Paris strategically for the rest of the season, and he was just left alone. In general, he wasn't a threat to win, and he ruined the good position that he was in during the beginning of the season, and just proved how he wasn't meant for the game. I also didn't like him personally at all. The final three end up meeting with all the prior winners of BBCAN, which is Jillian, John, Sarah, the Paquette brothers, and Kevin. Paris mentions her social game and how many alliances she made. Apparently, she made a lot of trios with other people in the house, and she claims that she wasn't a floater, though as she's talking about it, her definition of a floater lines up with what a coaster is. So, yeah. Derek mentions that he played the quote-unquote good cop to Kayla's quote-unquote bad cop, using Kayla as a shield and claiming that he played dumb to the house and would be fine losing to Kayla, but not to Paris. Kayla mentions her social game and how she's good at separating emotions from her game and to use people's emotions, while mentioning that she is ready to cut Derek, hoping that the jury isn't emotional. Paris wins part 1 of the final HOH, and Kayla wins part 2 of the final HOH. And you can tell that Derek's lack of studying and familiarity with Big Brother bit him in the butt over the last week pertaining to competitions, since his last win was in the triple. Paris and Kayla talk about how Derek needs to go and how there's never been an all-woman final 2 in Big Brother Canada history, which is still sadly the case today, even after this season and this final 2. Paris wins the final HOH and evicts Derek. I'm gonna be honest, Derek wasn't an interesting person to watch throughout the season, but as a player, I do think he's a good player. He's one of those types of people who learns on the fly and they pick up on things very quickly. Though while I do think Kayla definitely helped him strategically and gave him the ropes, he had the better social game than her and he had his own strategic input as well. He also came up with tricking Will during the Final 5 veto competition on the fly, and he did have his own moments where he made moves without Kayla. At the same time, the final week or so has me ranking him a lot lower as a player than I was going to, because his lack of familiarity of Big Brother just bit him in the butt, and he didn't have the killer instinct to cut Kayla or to realize that she would cut him as well. I also think him not being a fan of the game put him at a disadvantage because the jury would see him as someone who was pretty much given everything and didn't take it as seriously as many of the others. We get to the jury questioning where Ryan asks Kayla what she can do to change his mind about her being the least likely person to get his jury vote, which hasn't changed since he was evicted a month ago, essentially. And she responds with him being the only person to see through her, how she was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and how she was the one who needed to go instead of Derek. Ali asks Paris if her preaching loyalty was true or using people's emotions, and Paris responds that she did play with people's emotions at times, but she did remain loyal to people for the most part, but does regret that she promised Ali she would keep her and then going back on it, and then explaining her strategy behind evicting Ali. Olivia asks Kayla what big moves she made before winning HOH on day 34, and Kayla responds with aligning and molding Derek to be the player that she needed him to be, so he would be evicted before her, and most of the PJers, like Andrew, Hamza, and Jesse, were numbers for Derek instead of herself. In reality, she had little to do with any of those boots. Johnny asks Paris why Kayla played a worse game than herself, and he tells her to drag Kayla through the mud. Paris responds with Kayla getting into a romance made her a target from day one, and Kayla was too obvious with who she was aligned with, which Paris predicted, and that she brought Kayla to the final two. They both start yelling their answers, and it's really annoying to watch and listen to. Maddie asks Paris to tell the jury why she didn't fall into the final two, which was some of the jurors' perception of her. Paris mentions that she started playing night one, got herself into 4 alliances that had her in the middle. I don't know what these 4 alliances were, but clearly it was something that we missed. Pinned people against one another, made a deal to go to the final 4, since Maddie would always leave before her, and won the final 2 HOHs. Will asks Kayla why was it more strategic to boot himself over Derek, and Kayla responds that Will and Paris would have taken one another to the end over herself, and Derek would have taken her to the end. So it was a security blanket. Kayla mentions that she told everyone in jury that she would have cut Derek in the final 3, and she carried him to the end. Derek asks Kayla what was the biggest secret she kept in the house, and she responds that she has a criminology and psychology degree, which caused her to separate her emotions from gameplay. Since there were so many emotional people in the house, and she thanked the cast for being babies, which was something she could play with, and was just a stupid answer in my opinion. For their final pleas, the two start screaming their heads off. Actually, not starts, they continue to scream their heads off. Kayla screams that she's been a target since day one due to her showmance, won the most competitions in the season, she's been a have-not longer than anyone in the season, everyone in the jury is there because of her, she played the entire season instead of just a week, like Paris did, and how she's a superfan who's wanted this her entire life, and she wants to represent this crazy season. Paris screams that she's played her personality down, or she would have been evicted on night 6. She has a criminology and legal studies degree, is a law student, played both sides of the house, went 8 weeks and 10 rounds without ever being nominated. Her social game carried her instead of competitions, but she won the most important competitions at the end. Paris ends up winning the season in a 6-1 vote. Kayla was definitely very enjoyable to watch from the time we started seeing her, which was really in the second half of the season. And I didn't really recall how lopsided the edit was, especially with them editing out Kayla's gameplay from the very beginning and making sure to not show flashbacks which would cooperate with whatever she was saying, especially in her argument with Paris. She had many good relationships with people in the beginning of the season, though there were a few who were targeting her, but she was always protected in the first half of the season, and she and Derek were able to convince Hamza to keep them safe with just one simple conversation. Due to her wanting to keep Marin, her game started falling apart afterwards, but her and Derek started winning competitions made up with people like Ali, Olivia, and even the trio at several points in time. I love how cutthroat she was about the game, how she was willing to make any moves that she needed to, but her flaws were a lot more noticeable. She kept on telling everyone that she would cut Derek, but the longer she went on and kept him, it just made her look worse. And it didn't help that a lot of the jury felt like she and Derek got everything they wanted in the season, so they didn't have that underdog factor. She also didn't understand the emotional element of Big Brother, where you need to make people want to vote for you and to make them feel secure with you enough to not just feel like pieces. And while I don't think her jury management was bad outside of Ryan, she didn't understand the emotional part of jury management or just relationships as well, and that bit her in the butt. Especially with her calling the jury emotional and babies, which isn't going to endear them to your cause. Okay, so I do think Paris is a good game, and people mentioned throughout the season that she was very good socially, and I do think that was her strongest point. At the same time, I remember distinctly on the feed that she had so many reads on the house which were just very incorrect. She tried to be the mastermind to get people to do whatever she wanted, but a lot of time they just didn't take what she said seriously and what she wanted didn't end up happening. It was impressive that she was able to have Maddie be a shield for her, essentially, and for Maddie to be her biggest cheerleader in the jury house. And she was able to bond with many people as they were going out the door. And she did win herself at the end to take herself to the end, and she had that underdog factor. At the same time, I just can't get over the fact that she had very little agency throughout the entire season, and the edit made her come off like some sort of mastermind when she really wasn't a factor in all of the weeks. At the same time, she did have a strategic mind for the game, and I do think she's a better player than her gameplay in this season showed. My opinion on her might be more secure once I get into ranking the cast as game players. As a personality, she was just okay for me to watch. There are many times where she annoyed the F out of me, but there are a lot of times where I rooted for her and I was very invested in her journey and her story. So I am thinking about ranking the season third or fourth, just from what I recapped and my rewatch of the season. The first half was very boring and was inaccurate AF, but there are a lot of intricacies that were happening that made the second half of the season to be very explosive and had many of the highs in Big Brother Canada history. The cast, I also feel like, was a very mixed bag, as I feel like the group of men were some of the weakest, not only just in gameplay but in personality as well. But the group of women were some of the strongest in BBCAN history, pertaining personality and gameplay. In many ways, it's aged better than some of the other seasons, and it isn't forgettable like some of the other seasons, but it doesn't have some of the highs like BBCAN5 and some future seasons, just from my memory. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be making a video ranking the BBCAN6 cast as game players relatively soon. Bye!